So, welcome today with this Inspire Good Practice webinar on data service linking simplification. This is the final step for asking to Inspire MIG and MIGT for the endorsement of this good practice, where the MIGT subgroup 2.3.2 has been working since March 2021. So this piece of work is mainly due to a group of volunteers from the subgroup which I would be willing to really thanks for the work achieved during all this time, and especially in the last period, which has been quite busy. And this thanks to Antonio Rotundo from Italy, Ine de Visser, which will be starting the presentation today, from the Netherlands, Marie Lanvois from France, and our expert in Denmark, Heidi Pamparis. Here the GSC have been collaborated in order to orientate the work and making it, let's say, evolving during all this period. So with this said, I just want to ask our colleague Ine de Visser to start with the presentation. Ine, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. We have much to say today, so we will very fast do our presentation so that we have still room for questions and discussion about these issues. I will start with the introduction. And I will give the floor to Antonia and also to Marie to go in depth with what we exactly have done is part A and B for the simplification. So the context of our action is the Inspire MIG Maintenance Implementation Group Working Program, where there is an action where we work on implementation of Inspire with the requirements as they are on this moment. There are also two areas of work more with focus on the future. As mentioned before, we had a small subgroup. We started with this the bigger group in 2021, but it's also further work on what was done in 2019 and Action 2019.2, and also earlier with a small ad hoc group. So the work started already in 2018. The main activity is to develop an approach for simplification of data service linking, and also it should be used with widely used web applications, and we following the good practice procedure on this moment. So you will ask why we are doing this. I think people, implementers of Inspire, recognize this picture. This is how it works on this moment in the Inspire Geo portal. When you try to link data sets and services, it's very complicated, the dependencies, and it's very easy to make somewhere a mistake. So, and then your download or view service is not visible in the Inspired Geo portal. This is why we are working on this simplification, because it is too complicated. We discussed this already in the 25th MIG team meeting. Because there are not enough datasets where the linking was good. So that has negative impacts on the accessibility of inspired data sets. And also that becomes visible in the indicators in the yearly monitoring round. The current approach is too complicated, as you have seen in the picture I showed here before. And also extensions on the base standards are an obstacle to implement Inspire. There's also an overlap and duplication of datasets and service metadata. So it doesn't work that well. The MICT supports a new data-centric approach instead of now the approach where network shares and data sets are more or less the same. Also, MICT recommends that there should be one source of truth for service metadata, so not standalone metadata and metadata and capabilities together. Summarized, it's the current approach is too complicated. The result is that there is a low level of accessibility in the Inspire datasets to view and download services, and that has a negative impact on the overall usability of Inspire infrastructure. The intended outcome, what we want to reach is that users can access available data through the view and download services. Someone has some backtrack later, strange noise. Yeah, thank you. So the goal is that the users of the Inspire infrastructure can access all available datasets via view and download services. That it becomes easier to implement and understood the documentation and the requirements, and that off-the-shelf software can be used. Also, the duplication of metadata should be reduced, and the search of metadata and should become easier because there is no redundancy in the metadata for source metadata and dataset metadata. What we have done for this, it's an alternative way to provide data service linking, so it's not mandatory. What should be done is that dataset metadata record shall have some additional elements. Antonia will go in depth more. There is no need for view and download services to be documented through their standalone service metadata records. And also the extended capabilities section is not needed anymore. This is very this is a picture of the overview what should be removed. So the things in red are not needed anymore. We described it in two sections because you don't need to implement everything. You can also only implement part A. But if you need to like to simplify more, you can also implement part B. And by now I give the floor to Antonia to explain part A.
Thank you very much, Ina. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, the part A is specifically dedicated to the simplification of linking between datasets and services. This part was developed in a different time with respect to the part B, but both the parts are a unique specification. The part A is explained in detail in the section 8 of the final specification of the good practice. Next slide, please. As Ine said, the part A is aimed to simplify the linking between the datasets metadata and the services metadata. Currently, the linking is between datasets and services is established through service URL to be provided in the dataset metadata record, and through a couple resources to be provided in the service metadata record. With the reference to the service URL, the reference TG requirement is the requirement 1.8 that states in a generic way that a resource locator shall be provided. And in addition, the recommendation, the slide before, please. And in addition, the recommendation 1.9 suggests to provide additional metadata elements in order to give more details about the online resources. Although no requirement required to provide specific locators about view and download services in practice, and in the Inspire framework, view and download services are required. This implies that at least 2 locators need to be provided in the dataset metadata. The next slide, please. To simplify this, and in order to avoid the service metadata record in case of view and download services, the proposal of the good practice required to add 2 metadata elements with reference to the online resource. These metadata elements are the protocol and the application profile that in case of view and download service, in case the data providers doesn't use the service metadata record, then those elements became mandatory. These 2 metadata elements can be encoded either by using anchor element and by using or by using a character string element. In case of using anchor element, the URIs, the value, the attribute, href attribute of the anchor element shall point to the URIs coming from Inspire register. Specifically for protocol, the Inspire protocol value register, and for application profile, the spatial data service type register to say if a service is a view or download service. In case of using a character string element, then the requirement is to use the value of the label present in the Inspire registers in the metadata language if the language is available in the Inspire register. Next slide. This is an example for a view service. As you can see, the URL point to the get capabilities of the services of the service, and the protocol point to the URI coming from the Inspire register that in turn refer to the external URI coming from the OGC register. And for application profile, in this case, as it is a WMS service. The application profile is encoded through the URI related to the view service. Next slide. With the reference to the coupled resources, the current approach is stated by the requirements 3.6 that states that the link to the dataset shall be provided through the use of operates on elements, and these elements shall point to the MD data identification element. Next slide. The proposal for simplification is first relaxing the implementation of a coupled resource by making the linkage to the specific element data identification an option feature, and making it possible to point to the URL of the metadata record, for example, as the response to a get record by the request. So this will imply a new wording of the DG requirement 3.6. Then the proposal is to use the element present in the get capabilities document, that is metadata URL for WMS and WFS in the layer section of the get capabilities document, pointing to the metadata record. As I said previously, for example, using the link to the response of a get record by the request. In case of Atom service, for each entry, the proposal is to use the link element with an attribute rel with the value described by, and the attribute value type with the value application XML. This will imply that the service metadata record not to be provided, and that the data providers can use the metadata present in the get capabilities document instead. Next slide. This slide shows the schema of the proposal of the good practice. This schema only the mandatory elements are present. So with the new simplification approach, the data providers will have to provide only a dataset metadata record in a discovery service, and the metadata and the service metadata are those documented directly in the get capabilities document. The only requirement is that in the layer or in the feature type or in the entry section of the get capabilities document, there will be an element pointing to the metadata, to the dataset metadata record. Next slide. This is the same schema, but with the additional optional elements, such as the service metadata in discovery services, that with this proposal will become optional instead of mandatory. Next slide. Then, in addition to this part A, in the part B, there is a remapping of extended capabilities in order to avoid also this part. To talk about this part B, the floor is to Marie Lambois. Thank you.
Thank you, Antonio. So as Antonio just said, I'm talking about part B. So it corresponds to chapter 9 in the simplification best practice, good practice. Next slide, Ina, please. So basically the idea is just to be able to get rid of the extended capabilities part of the get capabilities of the web service. Next slide, please. So to be able to do that, we worked at defining an alternative mapping of all the Inspire service metadata elements that were in the extended capabilities. So we tried to map that to the other elements, the standard element of the get capabilities, or to the data metadata. It's important to mention, no, just before again, it's important to mention that it's an optional thing, so you can still use the extended capabilities, but it's not mandatory anymore, so that for some software in the market that have not these extended capabilities, you would be able to use them. Next slide, please, Ines. So I won't go through all the detailed mapping. You have everything in the slide, just in case to come back. But just some general principles. So sometimes, like in this case, we decided that the metadata element was not relevant anymore. So for example, it's a resource type, which is a service, and so you know you are in a service, so it's a useless element. Next slide, please. Sometimes we found that the information was already in the dataset metadata, so it's the case for the spatial data service type. So Antonio just described that we have the spatial data service type in the application profile, so it's mapped there. Next slide, please. And sometimes it's a little bit more complicated as it depends on the web service types. So it can be different in WMS, WFS, or AtomFeed. So in this example, we have sometimes a mapping to the get capabilities response, and sometimes it's to the dataset metadata. Next slide, please. So we have tried to be as much as we can compatible with what the geoportal needed, and this conformity element is important for the indicators. So we have introduced mapping to a code list so that it can be easily automatically parsed. Next slide, please. So that was an easy one. Next slide, please. Next one. I think I won't go through all the. Okay, so this one is a little bit different. So it's the language. So for the WMS, if you have several languages supported, we couldn't find any way to map that to somewhere else in the get capabilities document. So we decided that in this case, if you have a WMS Inspire service and that you support several languages, then you would still need to use the extended capabilities. So that's a limitation in our current mapping. Next slide, please. So sometimes we discovered some strange things in the current technical guidelines. So, for example, the unique resource identifier, it was not really clear why it was needed. So we decided that it's now not mapped, as it was not required in the implementing rules. So I went quickly, but I invite you to go a little bit further in the mapping, and you will see that every element is well documented in the good practice. We didn't work yet on the new family of OGC APIs, so it has not been agreed yet for the Inspire metadata elements, so it was a little bit too early to work on that. And the idea is that this good practice works well without service metadata, so it works well with the option A. Otherwise, you could have several inconsistencies, and so at least you should make sure that you do not introduce any inconsistencies between the metadata informations.
So this was our introduction. At Jordi, I think we wait with the questions after the next session, the next part of the program. So I will go further with the implementation and implementation evidence of the Netherlands. In the Netherlands, we have a Dutch metadata profile. It's was definitive in 2020, last version, and there was already the protocol and the URL mandatory. And also we said it's protocol should be one of the OGT protocol code list. The element application profile is in this version of the Dutch profile still optional, but it can be used in standard software, our Dutch register, to add the necessary information on view and download services. So this the code list we used. It contains the codes also available in the Inspire code list, but we have also our own code, our own values added for other use cases. We have also a guide on how Inspire can be implemented to give more directions and explanations. And in this guide, we have also explanation on how this simplified data service linkage could be made. It's in Dutch only, so not for most of you, I think, readable. We have also an example, XML example, how this should be done. And in our Dutch validator, this simplified data service linkage is also tested, and it causes not an error but a warning because it's not mandatory. And last but not least, in our Dutch geo-register, the view and download services are available via this method. And these are the links to the documentation I mentioned. The floor is to Antonio for the implementation in Italy.
Thank you, Ina, again. Next slide, please. In Italy, the national metadata profile is aligned to the latest version of Inspire metadata TGs, and also extending this technical Inspire TGs. The latest revision of the metadata profile was made at the beginning of this year. Next slide. The metadata profile, the national metadata profile, already includes the two additional metadata elements proposed in the good practice, that is protocol and application profile. And the difference with the proposal of the good practice is that these elements in Italy are both mandatory and are mandatory in for all type of services, not only for view and download services. Next slide. The other difference with the proposal of a good practice is that these two metadata elements, protocol and application profile, are encoded by using only the anchor elements, and it's not possible to use chart string instead. The register to be used for the URIs for both metadata elements are the same of the obviously are the same of the proposal of the good practice. So the protocol value register for protocol metadata element and special data service type register for the application profile element. Next slide. As I said, the two metadata elements are mandatory for all type of services and not only for view and download services. And this implied that we needed to extend the Inspire protocol value also to cover other cases of online resources as a web page with further instructions or direct access for downloading the datasets. Two cases that are included in the Inspire TG recommendation. To cover these two cases, we have extended the Inspire protocol value register by adding two other values that are published in the national registry. This could be useful to be added also in the Inspire central registry in case other member states could use these two additional values. Next slide. This is an example of the direct link to is an example of a link to direct download by using the value published in the national register. Before. In this case, as you can see, the application profile shall have the value other instead of a specific type of services, and the value other is as well included in the spatial data service type register. Next slide. With reference to implementation of the part B, this part is not implemented yet, but the data and services providers in Italy are very interested to implement this part. The reason is that currently there is a low level of accessibility to Italian Inspire datasets. As you can see, currently more than 6,000 datasets and series records are published in the Inspire geoportal, but a very, very low percentage of these datasets are identified as viewable and downloadable datasets. But on the contrary, if we see the Inspire indicator about the number of services documented through metadata in Inspire GeoPortal, we see that the number of these services is relevant, is more than 2,000 of services documented in the Inspire GeoPortal. This means that in most cases the services are implemented through the OGC-based standard, and the service providers don't include in the OGC-based standard the extended capabilities required currently by Inspire. Consequently, the implementation of the Part B with this number of services documented through metadata will imply an increase in the level of accessibility of dataset. So this new approach will be very useful in Italy with respect to all the users that will be facilitated to access and use the Italian Inspire datasets. Thank you. The floor now is to Marie for French implementation.
Thank you. So I will share a little bit about the French implementation, not so much the what we do, but the why and how. Next slide, please. So I will start with a personal experience. So it's a priority dataset provider that comes to me very proud and announced that he has successfully created a dataset metadata that fully validates against the Inspire validator. Next slide, please. So that's the same priority dataset when I announced him that okay, it's great, but now he has to create a download service with extended capabilities, so he cannot use his current software solution. A view service also with extended capabilities, and then he has to create a metadata for each service, and in each metadata, reference the dataset metadata identifier so that the Inspire GeoPortal understands that this service is serving this data, and thus this data is advertised as downloadable and viewable in the GeoPortal. So that's something that sounds natural for the early implementers, but for late implementers, such as the priority dataset provider, it really sounded crazy. Next slide, please. Especially because in the meantime, in our national catalog, his dataset was available and seen as downloadable and viewable, and so everything sounded great. Because in fact we have used this simplified approach of linking through the dataset metadata for years, since the beginning of Inspire. Let's say. Next slide, please. So it's documented in our national guidelines. So the last version of the guidelines is from 2019. So the approach that we described there is the one that was foreseen at this moment. So we have very, very small differences with the current approach. Next slide, please. But it's still based on URL protocol and application profile, so it's just some differences sometimes on the code list. But it will be aligned very soon as this good practice is published. Thank you. That's it for me.
Thank you very much for your contributions, Ine, Antonio, and Marie. So now it's the time for the revamp Inspire GeoPortal. So one of the important steps here for let's say pushing forward this good practice at the implementation level is that the revamp Inspire portal in which we are working is somehow implementing the approaches that our colleagues from subgroup 2.3.2 explained before. So next slide. As you know, we are in the process of revamping the Inspire portal. We are very near to launching it online. So as you know, the old Inspire portal provides access to the main tools and resources for the Inspire infrastructure, and it's currently based on own developments made at the GRC with the main focus of providing support to the Inspire monitoring and reporting process. And this is being revamped using a GeoNetwork-based backend. Next slide, please. Apart from the backend, we are revamping the user interface, and here the main advance is that we will be providing a new filtering option by high-value datasets. The high-value dataset implementing act is very near to being adopted by the Commission. And it's already available, this option, just waiting for this implementing act to be launched, and which is something that is expected by the end of the year. Next slide, please. The important element here is the GeoNetwork backend that is provided in the cloud. So the prototype was already delivered at the final quarter of 2021. And now the working system was delivered and also tested by GRC. And now we are just in the final steps for launching the revamp GeoPortal with the integration to between the backend and the front end, the user interface. Next slide, please. And here you can see a summary of the steps that we have been working on during the last months. So, and we are now facing the final process, which is the Inspire portal revamp, which is expected by end of November. We are a bit delayed with this integration of the backend, and also taking into account also some security issues that we are working on. Slide, please. And the most important topic here for this webinar is to say that during the development work that have been performed during the last month and in the scope of this revamp of the backend, we have already pushed for the implementation of the data service linking simplification, which should simplify as well the way in which the GeoPortal is evaluating the accessibility of data sets, as you can see here with these mandatory elements for linking data sets and services. Next slide. And what is have been achieved during all this work is that we have mainly pushed for implementing part A of this the specification that is being presented today in the GeoNetwork backend. There is a need to test really the functionality of this implementation, and we will be needing your help as data providers in order to really test the functionality really achieved. there is of course a part which is not implemented, which is mainly part B, because it was mainly ongoing work till today, the outreach webinar. So here it's important to highlight that all these pending implementations, despite that there is, of course, our push for implementing it in the geoportal, we will need to explore new funding options in the near future. This means that at the end of 2023, we will have to also provide new funding opportunities to push for these elements to be included in the revamp Inspire portal. All the parts that are pending, and we also invite different member states, countries that may be interested in such kind of activity to also think about possibly co-funding this activity to speed up this implementation. So as you know, now the revamped Inspire portal is based on GeoNetwork, which is an open source software, and for sure there will be opportunities for member states to push for implementation of such kind of improvements. So as you can see, this is not only benefiting the Inspire portal, but also the full community of GeoNetwork users, since all the code is also included in the main branch of GeoNetwork. And that's all from my side. Thank you.
So we come now to the question and answer part. Jordi, can you host that, because I see nothing on this moment except the presentation.
Okay, so if you can go to the next slide where we have the Slido. Please join at that Slido, where we will be collecting questions and also asking some questions or poll for gathering your feedback. So now I will share my screen. Hope that you can see my screen. So first question, please specify your country. The second question is if do you think that this is a good practice candidate is useful and necessary? At the moment, seems that we are receiving positive feedback. So at least nobody at the moment thinks that it's not useful or necessary good practice. So we will pass to the next question now. Rate the quality of this good practice candidate specification. So where we have one, the value 1 is weak and 5 would be strong. So which seems to have also good feedback at the moment. So of course we understand that maybe you have you need more time to dedicate to look at the final specification. But I think this is very good result at the moment. So let's go to the next question. Provide an overall rate of this good practice candidate. So at the moment we are receiving a score of 3.9 out of 5. Which is not bad. And the next question is, it's if you are willing to support the implementation of the first part A of this good practice candidate. It seems to also get quite positive feedback. At least we are not having an answer with a negative answer. And we have a 45% of people which are considering that perhaps are willing to support this implementation of Part A, and 33% of the attendees are willing to support it. So the same for Part B, which is somehow to the possibility of alternatively use the standard capabilities document of the services and implementing the requirements stated in this Part B of the good practice in order to provide the INSPIRE metadata elements which are required by the implementing rule. It seems to be also quite positive feedback. 50% of people perhaps are implementing it or supporting it, and 17% are considering to also in support for this good practice. So next question, are you aware of any related implementation examples of Part A in your country? So here most of the people don't know really, but this is probably something that will be appearing in the next months. Of course, we can have positive answer, this 8% on those countries that provided today these party examples. Going to the next question. So in the case you answer positively to the previous question, just to provide reference to this implementation example. So I can see here one example, and there seems to be some national guidelines also considering such kind of implementations. We will analyze this information later on after the webinar. Next question. Are you aware of any related implementation examples of Part B in your country? So the same as the question for Part A. We have a huge percentage of people which at the moment ignores the existence of these examples. But again, this will probably increase in the next months since there has been more promotion of the good practice. Also, the presentation in the MIG and MIGT meeting, which are scheduled at the end of this week, where we will be presenting the good practice for endorsement. Thank you for this. And the final question for this Part B implementation examples, just to provide any other implementation examples that you are aware of. So again, this will be processed after the webinar. Thank you for these examples. Question 11 is if this approach that has been presented in this good practice candidate is compatible within your national metadata profiles. So 36% of people participating in the voting says that it's fully compatible with their national metadata profiles. There is also a high percentage, the 36%, that don't really know if the national profiles are compatible, and almost 30% considers that could be compatible with a few changes applied. So this is the final question. So thank you for participating. Now we are taking the questions. So first question for the new Insperge portal: how do you identify the high value datasets to filter the metadata? This is a question a bit outside the scope of the webinar today, but just to provide a quick answer. So the current Insperge portal user interface will be filtering high value datasets by using the Insper theme keywords that the Insper data providers are already using. So this is possible because there is perfect correspondence between the categories for high value datasets that will be included in the implementing act, which is nearly to be adopted at the end of the year. And this correspondence is totally perfect with clear Insper themes in that which fall into that categories. This is the way that the Insper portal will be filtering by high value datasets. So there is nothing special to be implemented in the metadata in order to have compatibility or in order for your metadata records to be filtered in the Inspergio portal according to this option. So I think this could be. Will a special dataset of the European Commission itself also be visible in the new geoportal? So there is no at the moment metadata records from European level organizations and agencies, but currently DG Environment has also requested to explore also the possibility to harvest EU level metadata catalogs available. So this option will be possible in the future. So and we understand that this is also quite interesting to find a wide range of inspired data sets in the Inspergio portal for European, but also for national purposes. So hope that this question is solved. To what extent the candidate good practice is polarized by Esri technology? Okay, so I would leave this question to one of my colleagues participating in the subgroup. So Ine, Antonio, or Marie, if you want to answer this question.
Yes, I think this is not the case because it's independent of software, this method. So which software you are using, it's not the case. You can always this methods can you use to fulfill your Inspire requirements. Someone else who want to add something to this?
This is Jill Salago-Simmel from Esri. Is it okay if I address the question?
Yes, of course.
As mentioned, the good practice is software independent and certainly a good practice that Esri will support. And we have submitted evidence of supporting and worked through and provided that feedback during the development of the good practice. Thank you.
So, not sure if Antonio or Marie want to add something else on that. If not, I will also provide the information that in principle this good practice candidate has been developed as a kind of software independent good practice. So even our focus is that this good practice could be implemented in any of the software tools that are currently available in the market. And the main, as you could understand from the presentations today, one of the main objectives of this good practice is to get rid of this extended capabilities extension, which have been identified by InspireMig and a lot of data providers, software companies providing software solutions identified that this was an issue to push for implementation of Inspire. So once we are able to provide the INSPIRE metadata elements which are required according to the metadata implementing rules, and having this information ready in the INSPIRE portal without the use of these extended capabilities, we will, let's say, use these standard-based services, which will for sure easy the process of implementing INSPIRE in the member states. So this is the main focus of the good practice. So we'll consider this question as answered. And there is a personal opinion here on the use of the application profile field, which seems that the person that is not correct. So, and he's here proposing to be linking the media types code list that are available in the INSPIRE registry. So I would ask Antonio if he's willing to react to that question.
Yeah, media type refers specifically to the type, for example, format is an application or image, etc. And based on ISO standard, this kind of information could be documented, for example, using the metadata elements grouped in the medium information, for example. So, in our opinion, application profile is the metadata element to be used for the type of services to be used for the data sets, also based on the definition given by the ISO standard 19115 for application profile.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I reply to the question.
Okay, and if Antonio, if you want to also react on this, on the next question, which is seems to be related also, if you have.
Yes, the function code is the function metadata element is an optional element recommended in the INSPIRE metadata technical guidelines. So we have had some problem to find a mapping between the protocol and the function code, because not all the information can be mapped between the two type of metadata elements. Maybe a relation could be established between the protocol and the application profile. For example, if a protocol is WMS or WMTS, then application profile shall be viewed as a type of service. Or another example, if a protocol is WFS or Atom Feed, then application profile shall be download services. So I can see a relation between the protocol and application profile, but not with the function metadata element.
Okay, thank you, Antonio. So here we have a question asking if it's intended that the high-value data sets which are not reported for INSPIRE can be displayed. So I would say that for the purpose of the INSPIRE portal, we will be also considering always INSPIRE datasets, which is the, let's say, the scope of that geoportal. But of course, the mandates of the Open Data Directive and the High Value Datasets Implementing Act are requiring to provide datasets for in form directive. Of course, if a data is somehow in scope of both data directive, the INSPIRE directive, the in portal, but there is also the need for me to with the directive and the high value datasets implementing act, regardless of INSPIRE. So I can see the point that the member states and the different European countries are considering also the classification of high value datasets in their national catalogs. I hope this is answer the question, hopefully. Next question is, have the preferred values for protocol been determined to use either or both?
I can take this one if you want.
Okay, Marie, thank you.
So indeed, we had a discussion on this. So the mandatory element is the URI to the INSPIRE register. So it's what will be read by the tools. But sometimes in the implementation, it also allows a label. And so in this case, we currently define the label as the label mentioned in the INSPIRE register. We had a comment about this label because sometimes it's different from the label in OGC, but it appeared that the label in OGC are also sometimes not aligned together. So there is some work to be done on aligning those labels, but it's basically it's the label from the INSPIRE register.
Thank you, Marie. So let's go to the final question is, did you look into how to describe an OGC API features endpoint in an ISO metadata set on dataset? So maybe you can consider to have a look at the different implementation examples which were provided for the OGC API features good practice. So for sure there you will have examples of ISO metadata sets, metadata records describing such kind of data sets currently available with OGC API features APIs. So I think we can share later on in the chat the URL of this good practice in order to let you have a look. But in general, the description of a metadata record should be pretty the same as any other metadata record for datasets available using WFS, for example, or WMS. So the structure of the metadata record should not be very different apart from the resource locators that are provided in the metadata file for accessing these services or the APIs. So hope that we have finished then the questions, seems. So thank you very much for your participation, and now we'll stop my screen sharing and would be willing to check if there is any additional question in the chat. which seems not be the case, but now I will be leaving the floor to some discussion if somebody participating in the webinar is willing to react, provide some comments, provide some aspects of discussion today. So I would be really interested in having this discussion now. We have at least 12 minutes for that. So, and apart from this, I would be willing to ask our colleagues Ine, Antonio, and Marie to open their cameras just to be open for this discussion. And in case there is no further questions or topics provided by the audience, please, Ine, if you want to summarize why this good practice should be somehow endorsed by the MIC. So, as a conclusion for today's webinar, we are providing this final slide on the next steps. We are today in the outreach webinar, which is supposed to provide an update of on the final work for achieving this specification, which were already presented and explained by the different colleagues participating and volunteering for this work. But the important thing is that today we already provided the implementation evidences from different countries, the Netherlands, Italy, France, also the evidences on the push for this good practice, also in the Inspire portal, and we have also in the question and answer part the intervention of people from ESRI, which is somehow representing as well the software community here. But we have also this question about the independence of this good practice on the software platforms, which is really the case. So the important thing here is that there is a wide range of countries and also the possibility that this good practice is fully operational in different software tools. So this was the main objective of the last part in the presentation today. And we already received quite good feedback in the Slido poll that was launched earlier. And just to finish, we will be presenting submitting this good practice candidate for endorsement in the joint technical meeting of the MIC and also the MIC meeting, which is scheduled at the end of this week. And in case you are belonging to the representative or people participating in these meetings, I invite you to participate in the MICTI meeting in the 25th of November, next Friday, where we will be shortly presenting on this good practice, also the evolution of the work, the performance of this webinar today, and we will be also summarizing the slide of votings that we made to date, and also will be proposing this data specification for voting for endorsement as a candidate in this meeting. So if there is no more questions or from the audience, you can see the chat. Put it in the chat if or just react if you want to react, which seems not be the case. So first of all, I would be willing to thank you all for your attendance, but especially to the colleagues that were participating in this work, Antonio, Marie, and Ine, and also Heidi, which was following with this good practice in the background. And also many thanks to all other people participating from the beginning in this subgroup 2.3.2. And I hope you find interesting this webinar today, and at large extent the good practice. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye bye.
Bye bye.